Kia ora and welcome to Sector Report. Well, it's harvest time, so in this edition we pay homage to the picking season and put horticulture under the spotlight. One of the biggest threats facing growers targets crops belonging to the Solanaceae family. That's potatoes, tomatoes, capsicums, eggplants and tamarillos. I'm talking about the tomato and potato psyllid, or TPP, which turned up here about 4 years ago from North America. The psyllid is a vector for a deadly bacteria called Liberibacter, which is cutting a deadly swathe through crops. Journey with us to Wattie's tomato growing operation in Hawke's Bay, where the psyllid is putting a huge hole in the multinational's production. The same microscopic insect is devastating plantations of tamarillo trees. We visit 2 tamarillo growers in Northland, now facing plantations littered with dead and dying trees. And as part of our seasonal look at horticulture, we also take the pulse of the recognised seasonal employer scheme and find it in excellent health. But first, let's see what damage the psyllid is inflicting on our giant food producer, Wattie's. The health of a vast field of tomatoes on the outskirts of Hastings lies in the hands of this man, Wattie's crop supply agronomist Nigel Halpin. This crop represents just a fraction of the Wattie's tomato harvest. The multinational has some 450 hectares planted in tomatoes around Hawke's Bay, the only area where it grows the fruit. But it's all under threat from a microscopic insect and the bacteria it carries. Nigel's job is to find out as much as he can about the tomato and potato psyllid, or TPP, and control the pest as best he can.
We've been living with psyllid for 3 years, and basically the psyllid is a small insect, very mobile in flight, and lays eggs and then grows from eggs into a nymph and completes its life cycle back into adults.
So how does it affect the plant?
Depending on the stage of infestation, from early seedling transplants, it can kill the plant, through to infestations during flowering will cause multiplication of flowering and result in a lot of small fruit, through to heavy infestations close to the harvest, which will affect bricks and cause soft fruit and reduce the recovery when we harvest.
A foreign pest is the last thing any food producer needs, and at times the TPP psyllid has put big holes in Wattie's tomato production.
We've had mixed results over the last 3 years. The first year it hit Hawke's Bay, 2007, it had a huge effect on factory recovery and in the vicinity of 20% reduction in yield in the field. Since then we've had results ranging from 50% loss through to down around 10% loss. So it's a continual challenge. We're yet to complete a season with a psyllid-free crop, so something we have to be vigilant about. And we also have an added threat that there's a bacterium that the psyllid can transmit, which would be more devastating if that got into our crop as well. So to date we've been okay with that, but it's part of the reason why we try to keep numbers so low in the crop.
Nowadays we're learning to live with it and working around it with the researchers and our own agronomists and the growers and the like. But when it first hit and when we first started noticing it, it created large shockwaves throughout the whole industry. Internally at Wattie's, it was something new. We knew it was going to be a risk and a threat to our business. And we needed to get up to speed really quick with this pest. And so we made contact globally. We've got a lot of smart people in-house in Hines, and we've also got a lot of R&D people around the world who were able to enlighten us a little about the psyllid.
And a pretty damn difficult critter to try and defeat.
Yeah, first of all, understanding how it overwinters, and in season how it behaves and how many cycles it will breed from, and how big the issue is. So yeah, it was a lot of unknowns, and luckily over the past 3 to 4 years we've been able to answer some of those questions. A lot of hard work internally as well as externally.
The common perception is that it's the microscopic psyllid insect, not unlike an aphid, that is the villain of the piece. It does do some damage, but it's the Liberobacter bacterium that it carries, which is the real enemy of not just tomatoes, but other members of the Solanaceae family, including potatoes, eggplants, capsicums and tamarillos. There are many varieties, but the TPP is the only one wreaking havoc among crops.
We have our tomato pest, which is tomato potato psyllid, TPP, but there's a lot of native psyllids to New Zealand, probably in the vicinity of dozens, a lot yet to be discovered.
But this one that's causing you all the problems is an import.
Correct, yes. Came into the country back in 2006. How exactly it hit New Zealand, no one's too sure, but the psyllid adults can travel in the jet stream. So, you know, it makes it extremely mobile, and there's also the potential it could have came in with cargo.
So what proportion of your crop here, say in this paddock, would be affected by the psyllid?
This paddock here would be looking at averaging most life cycles on each plant. So when I'm talking most life cycles, eggs, as well as nymphs, and the nymphs we monitor small, medium and large. And when we have large nymphs on the plant, that's when we see we're losing control. And adults are always flying into the crop and around the crop, so continual reinfestation from other areas, as well as psyllid completing their life cycle in the crop and flying around and relaying.
Scientists and the horticulture industry are working on several different solutions to the huge challenge mounted by the psyllid. In the meantime, it's a costly proposition to keep it under control.
It is, very much so. And obviously, as that's an incurred direct cost, Watties have had to increase the price per tonne to ensure that our supply base are well maintained and the gross margin is still there, so that we do have a supply into Heinz from our regular supply base who are used to dealing with all the issues that come with tomato crops.
One method of determining the size of the psyllid population in any one crop, a fashionably organic one at that, is to put these greased yellow panes out in the paddock. There were some psyllids on this sample, but far too microscopic for our camera to pick up. In the meantime, all an agronomist like Nigel Halpin can do is fall back on the horticulturist's friend, chemical spray. Watties has helicopters flat out at this time of year, trying to keep the psyllid at bay with sprays.
We've got an intensive insecticide program. We start with a drench in the nursery before the plants are transplanted. Then we monitor weekly and reach a threshold, normally between 4 and 8 weeks, we will start a weekly insecticide program where we've got 6 chemistry groups we're using, and that keeps numbers at bay, but it's a continual battle, especially today after we've just had 150 mil of rain, so it'll be 3-4 days before we can get back on the ground for spraying.
It must be expensive to treat.
Yes, definitely. It's added a huge cost to the growing operation, in the vicinity of $600 to $800 a hectare, which for the tomato-based, the Watties tomato crop, we're talking around $350,000 to $400,000. And this has been reflected in the price. Since tomato psyllid's been around, we've had substantial increases in raw material price to help growers cover the cost.
Watties agronomist Nigel Halpin with a depressing tale of the damage a tiny insect import is inflicting on our crops. Coming up, the psyllid's devastating impact on commercial tamarillo producers. But next, with the picking season in full swing, we check the health of the RSE scheme for migrant workers harvesting our crops. And we find it's revolutionised the ability of croppers and orchardists to hire reliable workers at this busy time of the year. Back in a moment. A gang of workers from the Pacific Islands to our north hard at work. Hawke's Bay's orchardists and croppers are in the thick of their busiest time, harvesting crops. And without the recognised seasonal employer scheme, it's hard to see how they could get the labour in enough numbers and at the necessary skill levels to do this work. RSE came in under the last Labour government. Before that, hiring labour was probably the biggest problem faced by our growers.
We had crops literally rotting on the trees, and we used to say it didn't matter who you were that rang up, as long as you had a heartbeat or a warm body, that was enough for us, you know. We just couldn't choose. 1 day, 3 days, a week was enough for us because we just couldn't find enough staff to do the work that we needed to do. And it really hampered our industry. In horticulture, if you pick a crop, not so much pruning, but if you pick a crop, there's a particular timing that is most important. Too soon is not good enough, it impacts on quality, and too late similar. So there's only one time in horticulture when you can harvest, and we just didn't have the numbers of staff and the quality of staff to do that. And so although our quality of our produce was heralded around the world, we could do still a lot better, and we're doing that now with RSE. Growers were part in that as well, because these contractors supplied staff to the growers, wine growers, apple growers, strawberry growers, and we were all in the same boat, that we just couldn't find enough staff. And that was well known around the world, and so we had illegals coming to New Zealand, offering themselves up to do the work. And if you've got, say, $1 million worth of crop hanging on the trees that needed picking this coming week, and you have no staff, and there's a group of illegal labour offering themselves to come and work for you, you say gladly no, and you take the risk. And unfortunately, that's what we have done in the past. With RSE, we now have a legal option, and growers have taken it on board, and it's gone really well. And we don't actually talk about illegal labour any longer. That's the neat thing about it. They still say there is illegal labour in New Zealand, but definitely not in our industry.
The day we called, it had been raining, and this group of Tongan workers was confined to barracks. Accommodation and food is provided at a cost of about $100, which comes out of their pay packets. They certainly seem happy with their lot in life and are able to send money home for all sorts of purposes. The average for their 5 or so months here is usually about $6,000 net. Some provide solar panels for electricity in their villages, or take home chainsaws and weed eaters to keep the tropical growth under control. School fees are a big factor too, for people like Marilyn Spooner from Vanuatu.
I have a husband in Vanuatu with my children. I leave my children behind and my husband, so I came here to work for my kids, to help them with their school fees and help my families.
They have been learning to speak English a bit better than they were last year, so that's been good. Having them come and stay on our property has been a different thing for this year, our first time. So that's been really good, and setting it up and everything has been quite a bit of work, but it's, they look after the place, and they're good. They laugh and they sing and they have fun, and then they work and work and work and work and work.
One of the Vanuatu boys told me, Jerif, it's really not important that we come here because we don't have hunger back home. But the thing that we do have is that we're short of money to be able to build proper houses, to send our children to school and so forth. And that's what we're able to do now. We've got people from the Pacific that are now starting their own businesses. Definitely a lot of money is spent on their homes, improving their homes, making sure that they're cyclone proof and so forth. So concrete block buildings, corrugated iron roofs and so forth. Electricity, water reticulation, that's another important cost centre that they spend their money on. A lot of them take chainsaws, weed cutters, solar panels back home as well. So this is the money spent here, but it's actually really used back home.
When the RSE scheme first came in, there was some resistance from growers who saw it as government intrusion into their businesses. In fact, such was the degree of cynicism, some growers called the RSE recognised social engineering, but the industry seems to be happily on board these days. But Jerf van Beek points out there is still quite a bit of red tape to untangle for a grower who wants to get into the scheme.
There is, and that was done for a good reason, because of the history of our industry. We just talked about illegal labour and so forth. And so there was a lot of red tape, especially if you're talking about bringing people in to do work, and at the same time we did have unemployed New Zealanders as well. So this is not a cheap labour scheme. We never wanted it to be that way, because we wanted to make sure that New Zealanders had the first chance to work in our industry. And that's still our main aim. And through RSE, we definitely have increased the numbers of New Zealanders working in our industry, which has been really great.
Orchardist Stuart Burns is one of those who hopped on board the RSE scheme after converting a disused packing house into accommodation, and he's glad he did.
We didn't have a problem getting labour in our specific niche in the industry. We start early with summer fruit, but the quality of the labour was the issue for us, I think, and just the constant retraining that we had to do with backpackers and other workers coming through the operation. So this is what I mean by being solid. They've stayed here for 5 months, 6 months of the year sometimes. Yeah, very good.
Is it a costly process from your point of view as an orchardist?
There's more initial cost. There's the outlay for their travel, half of their travel. There's also an ongoing costs that are higher than just New Zealand workers, but it's pretty much offset by the fact that you've got them for such a long period of time, and they are performing well.
Hawke's Bay orchardist Stuart Burns there, singing the praises of the recognised seasonal employers scheme. When we return, we visit 2 Tamarillo orchardists on their properties at Maungatapere in Northland to see firsthand the carnage caused by the psyllid. It's a heartbreaking sight for Northland orchardist Robin Nitschke. Hundreds upon hundreds of dead Tamarillo trees, destroyed courtesy of the TPP psyllid, which doesn't just devastate tomatoes, capsicums and potatoes. Tamarillos are particularly vulnerable. They're a member of the same plant family, the Solanaceae. It's a huge hole in Robin's 10,000 tree orchard, a midlife venture for him after many years in the tourist industry. He and neighbour Craig Watson have both been hard hit.
Well, this looks, to my untrained eye, like a reasonably healthy tree, but what's going on here?
Yeah, this is a 3-year-old tree which has had, this is in its second crop, but here's a very early sign of low beribacter infection.
Right.
Early signs are usually on the tips, and we see this, what we call pinking. It's normal to have red little leaves, but here we see a mixture of pink and green banding, and we see what we call downward cupping, and that's the shape that we see here. From here on up the whole row here, these are all infected trees. These trees were all healthy during the winter, June, July, August, and this has all happened this spring and summer. And so what you see is either total death of the tree, but sometimes you see this regrowth scenario where a tree will attempt to carry on, but the leaves are very small, very deformed, and this tree will never crop normally.
Or if it does, it would be tiny little marbles.
Tiny little deformed fruit which actually don't taste very good at all.
Orchardists, of course, talk to each other, and there's a Tamarillo Growers Association to help communication. So what has Robin been hearing, not just from Tamarillo growers, but those producing other members of the vulnerable Solanaceae family?
All having the same problem, the same issue. Obviously big industry's got a bigger problem. It's affecting the tomato people and potato people quite significantly. We're all basically trying to deal with the issue. It certainly has the potential to take out smaller industries like ourselves. It has the potential to take it out. It could be the demise of the industry if it's not managed properly.
So what's a Tamarillo grower to do? The first line of defence is to cut down the trees, remove them and replant. For a grower without his own nursery, the cost of replacements looms large.
The cost of replacement, I guess, depends on where you're sourcing your trees. The practice in the past would have been complete paddock replacement, paddock by paddock. That's not really viable anymore because you're seeing sporadic infection within a block, and the best way to keep your production up is to replace the trees as quickly as you can, as quickly as you see infection. So we've had to change our methods, because we've got young and old trees within the same block, that impacts on cultural methods and management as well, and brings its own problems and a bit of extra cost. So normally we would have been replacing about 20% of the trees every year anyway, right. But recently it's been up to 40–50%.
There's not only cost. With trees dying around them, these two orchardists face huge holes in their production. Craig has avocados and kiwi fruit, but tamarillos still provide 80% of his crop. Robin has tamarillos alone.
The effects from the time of infection can be a little bit delayed, depending on the age and stage of the tree, but certainly we have had huge production issues during last winter, where we were producing about 30% of previous amounts.
That's a huge fall, isn't it?
Huge fall.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, you've also got extra efforts and costs going into control, extra efforts and costs going into replanting. So you can really see the severe effect that it can have on viability of a crop like tamarillo.
And how about you, Robin? What's the effect been on your crop?
Well, we got 6,000 trees. 3,000 trees were at their maximum production last year, and we would have lost last year probably 20% of our trees. Since then it's increased more. We're probably losing now to over 25% that are either dead or dying.
Does it do its work fairly quickly on the tree?
It seems to. Certainly on the younger trees, we've got 3,000 trees are 3 years old. The other 3,000 trees will be about 20 months old, and I see the symptoms occurring in the smaller tree affects the younger tree quicker than it can with the older tree. They succumb to the disease very quickly. The older trees seem to be a little bit more resistant.
Still, believe it or not, there are cases of orchardists who are even worse off than these two.
One case comes to mind of an orchard in the Bay of Plenty, and there was an orchard of around the 10,000 tree mark, so it's a large orchard, and once symptoms started to be seen in this particular orchard, about 95% of these trees were infected. And once infected, these trees will continue. They'll either be debilitated or they will go quickly to death.
Surely he'd have gone out of business.
It would be really difficult for this orchardist. He's got to decide now how risky it is to replant. What would I have to do in this scenario to protect my trees? Is that worth it for me? And is that something I want to be doing?
Still, despite the devastation, this country is living up to its scientific reputation, and already the people in the white coats are working on beating the psyllid and its deadly Liberobacter cargo.
To start off with, they're looking at the life cycle of the insect. They need to learn more about the life cycle of the adult, the nymph and the egg, to basically find out just a little bit more what particular cycle, part of the cycle of the insect or the nymph, the egg or the adult is going to be more vulnerable. That's the learning part. Then the second thing is that we're doing various potted plant trials to find different insecticides which are going to be most effective in countering the psyllid. That's a critical one obviously for the tamarillo growers, because we need that information as soon as possible and to send that out to our growers. The third possibility, long-term opportunity there, is to try and find a biological control. A number of things, there's a Tamarixia wasp that's possible. A wasp, yeah. Tamarixia triazia wasp that they're looking at the moment. This has got possibilities very effective at killing the psyllid. The problem with that though, of course, is that there's the native psyllids at risk as well. And the wasp can't differentiate which is the psyllid that's affecting the TPP, that's affecting our tamarillos against the native psyllid. So there's a lot of trials going on. I was at a meeting about 6 months ago, and it looks like it could be a year, 2 years before we get even some kind of information or even useful information out of it. So that's a long-term prospect.
As Robin Nitschke gets his daily reminder of the deadly psyllid with his waiting bonfire of dead trees, he sounds a word of warning to home gardeners. It seems they are not immune either.
Up until possibly a year ago, there didn't seem to be a problem. Most gardeners traditionally had the typical lemon tree and the tamarillo tree in their backyard. Unfortunately, I'm hearing for the last 6 months that these tamarillo trees are now starting to die, and they're very curious about why suddenly the leaves have gone yellow, dropping off, and the tree is dying very quickly. So it's obviously that the psyllid now is not only finding the orchards where the large numbers, they're actually picking off the home gardeners as well.
Tamarillo grower Robin Nitschke there. That's Sector Report for this week. But remember, you can catch up with the program on our website. Catch you next time.